Human, please. My mother was bitten by a snake. Only you can suck the venom out and save her. Rain crashed through the canopy of Narrated, 3 in steady, heavy sheets. Every surface ran with water. The roots, the trunks, the rail ropes along the walkways, the old nails holding the planks together. The storm flattened sound into a low roar, but Cale Arden heard what did not belong there. A single, thin cry. He froze on the elevated trail, body already tense. The walkway under his boots swayed slightly, a narrow line of dark wood 30 paces above the forest floor. Lanterns and wire cages swung on their hooks, their yellow light smearing across wet planks. Fear touched him for a second. Not fear of the forest, not the usual fear of predators and falls. Fear of another emergency, another life in his hands. He felt his shoulders pull tight. Then habit took over. He shifted his weight, tested the slick plank, and turned toward the sound. The cry broke again. Hi, horse, a child. Cale moved fast. He unhooked one gloved hand from the side rope, stepped onto the side ladder, and descended. His cloak stuck to his back. Water slid from the short dark hair at his temples into his beard. The ladder rungs were wet and narrow, but his boots found each one without hesitation. Years of ranger work had trained his body to move first and argue later. He reached the ground and stepped into mud that swallowed half his boot. The forest floor smelled of wet soil, crushed leaves, and sap. Glowing spores hung in the air in pale clusters, their light faded by the storm. Thick roots rose in ridges. Vines drooped from the trees. The third cry did not carry far. The storm ate most of it, but Cale had the direction now. He pushed past a curtain of wet leaves, his hand brushing the knife on his belt out of habit. He saw a small figure kneeling in the mud ahead. A child, facing away from him, shoulders shaking. Lavender skin, long white hair plastered her back, bare legs streaked with dirt. Her hands clutched something on the ground in front of her. Cale's chest tightened. He walked closer, but kept his voice low. Hey, I'm here. The girl flinched and spun around. Her eyes were wide and pale silver. Rain ran down her face and mixed with tears. Her thin tunic, once cream, now looked dark and transparent from the water, clinging to her small frame. You're human, she said, breath catching. Please, help her. She shifted aside, and he saw the woman lying in the shallow dip beside her. For a moment, he stopped breathing. The woman was half submerged in muddy water, her body twisted at an angle, one leg inside the puddle, the other pulled up toward her. Her skin was a deeper violet than the child's, with a soft sheen along her shoulders and neck. Her long white hair spread over the surface, strands stuck across her cheek and collarbone. A forest wrap of dark green fabric hugged her body and thigh, soaked and nearly transparent in places. Her right thigh had ballooned around 2 puncture marks. The skin around them had turned a darker purple, almost black, with thin lines radiating upward. Each pulse of her heart pushed the color further along the vein paths. Cale knew that pattern. His stomach dropped. Viper strike. Fast binding venom. Little time. His mind shifted into sequence. Assess. Stabilize. Move. He knelt in the mud, ignoring the cold seeping through his trousers. He set 2 fingers at her throat. The pulse was strong but fast. Her breathing came in short, shallow pulls. Heat radiated from her skin even in the rain. How long since the bite? He asked. The girl rubbed both palms over her face, shaking her head. We were on the lower trail. She said we would gather bark and go back before the storm. The snake came from under the root. It hit her, then she fell. I tried to pull her. I could not carry her myself. Cale felt frustration flash through him. Not at the girl, at the situation, at the distance between here and the nearest clinic, at the storm that had turned the trails into traps. Your name? He asked. Myri, she said, voice thin. Her name? He nodded at the woman. Lysara. Myri gripped her mother's wrist again. She leads harvest lines for our village. She knows where the moss grows. We had to come. The elders need more medicine bark. So that answered one question. They were not lost wanderers. They belonged to one of the canopy communities that paid him to keep certain paths clear, to cull predators near walkways, to report landslides and broken ties. It was the side work that kept him out here instead of in a crowded station, away from human barracks and the quiet judgment of former commanders. He felt anger at himself now. He had checked this sector 2 days ago and declared it clear. He had not seen signs of a viper nest near this route. Either the snake had moved or he had missed the signs. Both options bothered him. He shoved the feeling aside. There was only one priority now. "We're going to my cabin," he said. "I can treat her there." Myri nodded quickly, her relief so sharp that it cut through the panic on her face. She shifted to help, although she was too small to do much. Kale slid one arm under Lysara's back, the other behind her knees. Her body felt hot and heavy from the swelling in her leg. Her head slumped against his shoulder, her hair cold against his throat. The forest wrap shredded slightly at the side when he lifted her, exposing more of her thigh and hip than he would have preferred. He looked away, then reset his grip, holding her firmly without adjusting for modesty. Survival came first. "Stay close," he said to Myri. "Hold onto my cloak so I know you're there." Myri staggered to her feet and grabbed the back edge of his cloak with both hands. Her fingers dug into the wet fabric. She waded through the mud behind him, feet slipping, but she refused to let go. They climbed back to the walkway. Each rung of the ladder felt more treacherous with the extra weight, but Kale's body remembered worse climbs and worse rain. He exhaled in controlled breaths, 1 foot above the other. Keep her angle steady. Do not jolt the leg. On the elevated trail, the wind hit harder. Lanterns rocked, chains rattling against hooks. The walkway swayed slightly with each step under their combined weight. The drop off to the side framed a blur of trunks and hanging roots. Myri's grip stayed at the same, pull on his cloak. She kept up, breathing hard, small boots, sliding, then catching again. Kale's mission out here had always been simple in his head. Patrol 3 sectors every 2 days. Check traps, clear hazards, log tracks for the outpost registry, send a weekly report to prove he was still alive and working. Stay away from people's domestic troubles. Stay away from villages with council drama. Stay away from any situation that felt like his old unit work, where failing meant writing a casualty line in a report. Now he carried someone who could very easily end up as another failure if he misjudged timing. He tightened his jaw and picked up speed. His cabin appeared through the rain as a dark structure on stilts halfway up a cluster of thick trunks. The outer deck jutted from the main walkway, with a simple railing and a line of nets hanging from hooks. A single lantern hung under the roof, its steady amber glow cutting a small hole in the blue-gray storm. He shouldered the door open. Warm air met them, filled with the scent of broth, roasting meat, and smoke. The cabin interior was narrow but long, all wood and rough beams. A hanging rack of bows, coiled cable, and snares lined one wall. A cooking corner took up the far right, with a low stove and a pot of simmering varan root and stripped river meat. A small table with 2 stools stood in the center. Against the opposite wall lay his sleeping pallet with layered hide blankets. The place had always felt deliberately empty. No decorations. No extra chairs, no toys, no spare cups beyond what a guest might need for a single meal. The space of someone who had planned to live alone and keep it that way. Now he crossed the room and lowered Lysara onto his bed. Myri climbed up beside the pallet immediately, dropping to her knees, hands hovering over her mother's shoulder without knowing where to touch. Kale pulled the lantern from its hook and set it on the floor close to the wound. Light flared across her thigh and hip, making the mottled spread of Venom stand out. He felt a pulse of worry. The discoloration had advanced since he first saw it. The veins around the bite bulged lightly under the skin. Sweat slicked her forehead. Her breathing sounded shallow and rapid. He spoke without looking away from her leg. "Myri, listen carefully. I need to know if your mother has any known weakness to plant medicines. Has she reacted badly to moss paste or bark infusions before?" Myri shook her head quickly. "She uses them for others in the village. She showed me how to crush Draxon and boil Erland bark. She never got sick from them." Her voice steadied slightly as she listed the names. Familiar tasks grounded her. Good. Kale stood and walked to a shelf beside the cooking corner. Jars were stacked in a neat row. Dry Draximoss, shaved bark chips, a clay container of ground roots. He grabbed what he needed and carried them back, his mind already pacing through the process. He had not just been a ranger on some border world. His unit had been the one you called to pull scouts out of toxic zones, to stabilize injured civilians until evac. Jungle medicine, improvised stabilization, venom management. He had spent nights with his hands inside wounds that never should have happened. He had also watched 3 people die from bites not very different from this one when supplies ran out. The memory flicked through him. He pushed it aside. He turned to Myri. Do you know what kind of snake it was? She called it a split fawn, Myri said. Brown scales, green marks on the side. Short, thick body. It came from under the root, then it disappeared under the water. Kale nodded. The description matched what he feared. Fast-acting, muscle-binding venom with a narrow window for intervention. His own mouth tingled slightly in anticipation. He looked at the placement of the bite. High on the inner thigh, very close to where her hip wrapped tied at the side. In most forest cultures, this area stayed covered except with partners. In his own culture, putting a mouth there carried its own weight. Respect mattered. Consent mattered. He had built his private life after discharge around those 2 basic rules. Help when asked, but never use someone's need to gain anything from them. He glanced at her face. Her eyes were closed. Her lips parted with each shallow breath. A small muscle in her jaw twitched. He spoke calmly. Myri, I have to talk with you about what comes next. She looked at him, shoulders pulled in tight. Will she live? He answered honestly. I do not know yet. The bite is high, and the venom moves fast. There is no clinic near enough in this storm. I can use moss and bark to slow it, but first I need to pull out as much as I can. The usual way is what you already asked for. I will have to put my mouth on the bite and draw the venom out. It is not perfect, and there is risk to me, but it is the only chance we have right now. Fear crossed her face, then determination pushed through it. Then do it, she said. I do not care what it looks like. She is all I have. The line hit him in the chest. He understood that feeling too well. The focus that came when someone was the last piece of your world that made sense. He gave one small nod. All right, stay near her head. Watch her breathing. If anything feels wrong, tell me right away. He rinsed his hands in a bowl of clean water, dried them on a cloth, then moved to her thigh. He untied the side knot of her forest wrap. The fabric loosened and slid away from the wound. Much more skin showed now from mid-hip to just above the knee. His throat tightened for a moment. Lysara was not only injured. She was beautiful in a way that was direct and physical. Strong thigh muscle beneath the swelling. Smooth lines of skin and curve. It would have been easy for his mind to go in the wrong direction. He did not let it. He set his jaw, adjusted the lantern, and bent over the wound. His lips closed around the puncture marks. The skin felt hot and swollen. The taste that hit his tongue was sharp, bitter, and thick. He pulled in a slow, hard draw. His jaw flexed with the strain. He lifted his head and spat into the empty bowl he had placed on the floor. The saliva glistened darker than normal. He wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist, then leaned down again. The second pull burned more. A faint numbness crept along the edge of his tongue. He adjusted his angle, careful not to scrape her skin with his teeth, careful to keep pressure exactly where the venom gathered. Behind him, Myri kept one hand on her mother's shoulder. Her eyes never left his face. Her breath came in short bursts. The third time he drew, Lysara jerked awake. Her eyes flew open, pupils wide. Her hand shot down, fingers digging into the blanket, body tensing under him. For an instant, all she would have felt was a stranger's mouth on a very intimate part of her body, a stranger's weight near her hip, fabric loosened and skin exposed. Anger and fear tightened her features. Her other hand clawed at the mattress, as if to push away. Kale lifted his head just enough to speak, keeping one hand braced on her leg to stop a sudden movement that could tear the tissue. "You are in my cabin," he said, voice low and steady. "A snake bit your thigh. The venom is moving fast. I'm drawing out what I can." Your daughter asked me to help. You are safe here." Her gaze jumped to Myri. The girl's face crumpled in relief. "He is not hurting you," Myri said. "He carried you through the storm. Please stay still." Lysara's breathing shuddered. Confusion, shame, pain, and memory fought across her face. For a moment, Kale saw something old and guarded in her eyes, something that did not belong to this day. Someone else's unwanted hands, someone else's misuse of her trust. He knew that look. He had seen it on survivors evacuated from raids and border accidents. It hit him with a quiet anger that had nowhere to go. He held her gaze. He let her see his focus, his strain, and the absence of any pleasure in what he did. "I'm not taking anything from you," he said, each word clear. "I'm only trying to keep you breathing." Her fingers loosened on the blanket. Her jaw unclenched. She lay back slowly, every motion still wary, but she did not fight him. He went back to work. He drew and spat until the taste changed and the numbness in his own mouth crept farther. His head felt a little light. The bowl at his side held cloudy streaks. The veins around the bite no longer darkened with each heartbeat. He rinsed his mouth with strong Ferland seed coffee from a cup on the table, swished, spat it out into a second bowl, then repeated. The bitter drink cut the taste and helped his tongue regain some sensation. He ground Draxon moss in his palm until it turned into a soft, damp paste and packed it gently over the wound. Lysara hissed between her teeth, her hands gripping the blanket, but she did not pull away. He covered the paste with a bandage strip, wrapping it snugly around her thigh. He checked her pulse again. Still fast, but less erratic now. Her forehead remained warm, but a fine line of sweat had eased. He sat back on his heels. Fatigue hit him in a wave. His jaw ached. The muscles in his neck and shoulders burned from the awkward position. Myri watched him, eyes huge. "Is she going to die?" she asked. He thought carefully before answering. He never made promises he cannot keep. Not after the field report that had listed 3 bodies under his name. "I've taken out as much venom as I could," he said. "The moss will help pull more. Her body still has to fight the rest. She has a chance now. Before, she did not." Myri swallowed, then nodded once. She turned to her mother and smoothed wet hair away from her face with small, careful strokes. Kale stood, his knees stiff, and walked to the stove. He poured hot larn fruit infusion into a small clay cup, the steam carrying a sweet, sharp scent. He cut a slice of roasted river meat from the pan, the surface crisp, the fibers inside still moist, and set it on a wooden plate. He brought the cup and plate back and crouched near the girl. "Drink this," he said. "Eat a little. You need strength to stay awake for her." She hesitated. Her eyes flicked to her mother, then back to him. "If I sleep, no one will watch her," she whispered. "I will watch her," he said. "I'm not going anywhere tonight." She studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she saw there eased her shoulders a little. She took the cup with both hands. The warm ceramic trembled against her fingers. She sipped slowly, the color returning to her cheeks as the heat spread. He reached for a folded shirt on a nearby crate. It was one of his older ones, dark and long. He shook it out and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric hung almost to her knees, hiding her soaked tunic. She startled at the contact, then relaxed, pulling the shirt tighter around herself. The gesture felt small, but it shifted something in the room. A line drawn between stranger and protector. He spoke to her in a quieter tone now. "Where is your village, Myri?" She pointed toward the upper left, beyond the wall, through the trees. 3 walks from here, high in the branches. Lysara leads the harvest group. I help carry bark. We trade it for medicine and oil. They sent us earlier today because the last storm ruined the store. Kale nodded. That fit with what he knew. He had taken a contract to keep the paths around their sector clear 2 months ago. It was supposed to be simple. Walk the routes, report damage, scare off predators. A quiet job for someone who did not want a crowd. "What about you?" she asked suddenly. "Why do you live alone here?" The question caught him off guard. He had grown, used to people not asking. He answered anyway. "I used to work in a regiment, in different forests on different worlds. I followed orders and kept people alive in bad places. I had enough of uniform walls and commanders who never saw the ground. So I took a settlement contract here. I keep the trails safe. I send reports. I hunt for meat and sell the spare. That is my mission now. Do you like it? She said. He thought about the quiet nights, the way the wind moved through the canopy, the way no one knocked on his door unless they needed help. He thought about the empty chair at his table that he never bothered to move. It is peaceful, he said. Most days, that is enough. He glanced at Lysara again. Her eyes were half open now, unfocused but aware. Her chest rose and fell in steadier rhythm. She looked at the ceiling, then turned her head slightly toward him. You put your life at risk, she said, voice rough. For someone you do not know. What? He walked closer, standing at the side of the bed. Her gaze met his. Her eyes were alight, reflective silver, clearer now that the initial fog had lifted. Because you were on a trail, I'm paid to keep safe, he said. Because your daughter asked me. Because I can. That is enough reason. Her jaw moved as she processed his words. She wondered about cost, about obligation. He saw it in the way her eyes narrowed for a second. He saw the weight of prior experiences behind that look. You do not claim a bond, she said. No demand. No price. He shook his head once. No, you do not owe me anything for what I did. You decide what comes next for you and your daughter when you can walk again. Myri shifted, pressing closer to her mother's side. She slipped one hand into Lysara's fingers. We had no one else to call, she said softly. Everybody tells us to wait for the council, for the elders, for the right moment. The forest does not wait. Kale understood that. Systems and councils worked on schedules. Venom did not. He moved to the corner near the bed and dragged one of the stools over. He sat down, feet firmly on the floor, knife within reach by habit. His body stayed alert even as fatigue pressed against him. Try to rest, he said. I will watch the bandage and your breathing. If the fever rises again, I will change the moss. In the morning, if the storm eases, I will send a signal to your village. For tonight, this is the safest place you have. Myri lay down against her mother's side, head tucked under Lysara's chin. The oversized shirt pulled around her. Her legs curled up, toes barely reaching the far edge of the pallet. Her hand stayed locked in her mother's. Before her eyes closed, she looked at him one more time. Please do not disappear when it gets quiet, she said. People vanish when things calm down. The sentence landed with unexpected force. It was simple and clean, the kind of line that came from experience, not imagination. He felt a tight pull in his chest. I will be right here when you wake, he said. He meant it, not out of duty, but because leaving now would feel like abandoning a job half done. Lysara's eyes closed again. Her fingers kept a faint pressure around her daughter's. Her breathing lengthened, each exhale a little slower than the last. The storm hammered the roof. Water drummed on the deck. The lantern light cast steady shadows across the room. The smell of broth and roasted meat lingered under the sharper scent of moss paste and sweat. Kale leaned his forearms on his thighs and watched them. His mission that evening had started as another patrol on a wet trail. Simple work to fill a quiet life. It had turned, in the span of a few minutes, into something heavier. He felt stress in the tightness at the back of his neck, in the way his hand stayed close to his knife, even though there was no immediate threat. He felt empathy in the way his focus fixed on every small change in Lysara's breathing and every tiny twitch of Myri's shoulders. He made a choice in that chair. He would not file this night away as an incident in a report. He would see it through. He would guide this woman through recovery until she could stand on her own, whether she stayed in his cabin or walked away. He would give the child more than a single rescue on a single rainy night. The forest outside remained the same. Wet, dangerous, alive. Inside the cabin, 3 lives had shifted onto a new path. The storm eased sometime after midnight. The roof still dripped, but the heavy pounding softened into a steady rhythm. Kale kept his place on the stool beside the pallet, elbows on his knees, eyes half open but alert. The lantern burned low. Most of the cabin sat in shadow. Lysara's breathing had evened out to a slow, steady rise and fall. Myri slept curled at her mother's side. The oversized shirt gathered around her like a small cocoon. Every few minutes her toes twitched under the blanket. Kale shifted slightly to stretch his back. His jaw still ached from the venom work earlier. His tongue held a faint numbness that hadn't fully faded, but it didn't concern him. He had dealt with worse. His attention moved back to Lysara. Sweat no longer coated her skin. The bandage around her thigh remained clean, no new dark lines seeping from beneath it. Her pulse, when he checked her wrist, felt steady. She stirred before he withdrew his hand. Her eyelids lifted slowly, and her gaze found him through the dim. She didn't recoil this time, but her confusion was clear. Her throat worked before she spoke. "Are we in the hunter's sector?" Her voice rasped like someone recovering from fever. "Yes," Kale said. "My cabin. You collapsed on the trail. Myri led me to you." Her eyes moved to the child asleep against her shoulder. She pressed her palm against Myri's back, grounding herself. Then she looked down at her thigh. The wrap had been retied, but the fabric still bunched awkwardly from where he had opened it earlier. She pulled the edge back a little and saw the moss-packed bandage. Her breath caught, not fear this time, more like the sharp realization of how close she'd been to losing that leg or her life. Her fingers hovered near the bandage. "You did this?" "Yes." "And before that, the other thing?" "Yes." He didn't embellish it. She studied his face, searching for something unspoken. Whatever she expected to find, she didn't. The tension in her jaw eased slightly. "I remember waking," she said. "I felt disoriented." "You were in pain," he answered. "That can confuse anyone." She absorbed this quietly, then looked around the cabin. Her eyes took in his gear on the wall, the simmering pot on the stove, the simple table, the single stool. The bare space of a man who didn't expect company. "You live alone?" she asked. "For a long time now," he said. "Why would someone live this far from others?" He didn't answer immediately. He moved instead to the pot on the stove. He ladled hot broth into a wooden bowl and brought it to her. "I prefer quiet," he said. "And it's easier to work the trails on my own. Fewer people to worry about." She accepted the bowl with both hands, steadying it near her chest. Her fingers trembled from weakness. The broth steamed, and she took a slow sip. The taste of Varen root was earthy, slightly bitter, softened by strips of river meat he had added earlier. Her stomach growled. She froze at the sound, then took another sip. Myri stirred. Her head lifted from her mother's shoulder, eyes heavy with sleep. "Is she better?" the child whispered, voice hoarse. "Kale, answer before Lysara could strain herself." "Yes, she's warming up." The fever dropped. Myri pushed herself upright and crawled closer to her mother. She touched Lysara's cheek gently. "You scared me," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought you were going to leave me too." That sentence, simple, scared, hung in the air heavier than the storm outside. Lysara's face softened, and she drew the child into her good side, careful not to shift her injured leg. "I am here," she whispered into Myri's hair. "I am right here." Kale looked away to give them privacy, though the cabin had no real corners to hide in. He crossed to the stove again, refilled his own cup with the last of the Larn fruit infusion, and leaned against the counter. Myri glanced at him once, nervous but grateful. He offered her a small piece of roasted meat. She hesitated, then took it. The surface crackled under her teeth, and she chewed slowly, hunger overtaking caution. Lysara watched the exchange. "She hasn't eaten since midday," she said quietly. Her voice sounded steadier. "We expected to return before the storm." Kale nodded. "Eat more yourself. You need strength to fight the venom." Lysara lifted the bowl again. Her hand shook, not from fear now, but weakness. Kale stepped forward without asking and steadied the bowl from below so she didn't spill it. His fingertips brushed hers lightly. She stiffened at the contact, but only for a moment. Then she let him hold the bowl steady. "Tomorrow," she said between small sips, "the elders will worry if we do not return." Kale shook his head. "The walkway between here and your village is flooded. 2 segments collapsed earlier. No one is reaching this cabin tonight. We'll send a signal at first light." Lysara closed her eyes briefly. Relief, frustration, and exhaustion shifted through her posture. "Will they come for us?" Myri asked. "They will," Kale said, "if they know where you were heading. Did you tell anyone you're out?" Myri nodded vaguely. I told Keeper Rilan we were going for bark, but the storm came early. Maybe you didn't hear. That's enough, Kale said. The signal will guide them. He checked the bandage on Lasara's thigh again. She watched him this time, muscles tense. He unwrapped the outer tie just enough to inspect the paste beneath. The moss had begun to draw the discoloration outward. The lines around the bite were no longer spreading. You're healing, he said plainly. Lasara let out a slow breath. Will I walk tomorrow? You shouldn't, he answered. The muscle is damaged. You push too soon, you tear the tissue. You stay off it for now. She looked at her daughter, then at the door, then back at him. If I cannot walk, how will we cross the bridge when they come? Kale straightened. Then I'll carry you. Same as tonight. Lasara's eyes widened slightly. Not with embarrassment this time, but with the unfamiliar experience of someone making a decision on her behalf without trying to control her. Myri crawled forward suddenly and sat cross-legged near Kale's boots. She stared at the bandage, then at his face. Will you go back to your patrol after you send the signal? She asked. Kale rubbed the side of his hand along his jaw, considering how to answer honestly without worrying her. I will stay until I know your mother is stable, he said. Then I will decide. Myri looked away, pulling her knees to her chest. People always leave when we start to feel safe. Lasara placed a hand on her daughter's hair. He helped us. That means something. Kale felt something twist inside at the child's words. He had met loneliness before. His own, other people's. But the way Myri said it carried the weight of too many days of uncertainty. He crouched down so he was at her level. I won't disappear without telling you. You'll know what I decide. And I don't leave sick people behind. Not ever. Her eyes lifted slowly. She studied him with a seriousness that didn't fit her age. Then she nodded once and leaned back against her mother's leg. Lasara shifted slightly, pulling the blanket higher over the child, then looked up at Kale. Why were you on the lower walkway tonight? She asked. Most hunters returned hours ago. Kale took the empty wooden bowl from her and set aside. I was finishing a patrol, checking for washouts from the last rain. This sector is my responsibility. She tilted her head. Only yours. Only mine, he said. Her brows tightened. That's a lot of ground for one man. Kale shrugged. I manage. She looked like she had more questions about why the outpost trusted him alone, why he took a job meant for a small team, why he lived so far from the village trails, but exhaustion dragged at her posture. Her head dipped slightly and her breath slowed. You should rest, Kale said. Your body needs it. Lasara let her head sink back against the pillow. Myri curled closer under the blanket, their limbs tangling in a familiar pattern. Kale dimmed the lantern, then moved back to his stool. He placed it where he could see both of them clearly. Rain tapped the roof again, softer now. Lasara opened her eyes one last time. Why did you really help us? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Kale looked at her. Not the wound, not the bandage, not the exhaustion on her face. Her. Because you were in front of me when the danger came, he said. And I don't turn my back on people who were fighting to stay alive. Her chest rose in a long breath, something easing behind her eyes. She didn't argue. She didn't question it further. Her eyes closed, and sleep pulled her under again. Kale settled on the stool with his back straight and his knife within reach. The storm outside shifted direction. The forest creaked. The lantern cast a thin band of gold across the wooden floor. He stayed awake, listening to their breathing, ready for whichever choice came next. Morning arrived as a faint silver glow behind thick clouds. The storm had slowed to a thin drizzle, the sound soft against the wooden roof. Kale straightened from the stool where he dozed lightly, his neck stiff but his senses sharp. The cabin felt warmer than the night before. The fire still burned low in the stove, casting a soft flicker across the room. Lasara shifted before opening her eyes. Her fingers tightened around the blanket as she tried to adjust her leg, but stopped when pain shot up her thigh. She sucked in a quick breath and steadied herself, her expression tightening. Kale stood and moved closer. Easy. Let me check it before you try to move. Myri was still asleep beside her mother, cheek pressed to Lasara's arm, her small hands curled into fists under the blanket. The oversized shirt had bunched up near her hip, and one bare foot stuck out toward the edge of the pallet. toes twitching occasionally. Lysara looked down at the child before nodding. She didn't sleep this deeply last night. She was exhausted, Kale said. You both were. He untied the bandage slowly. Lysara gripped the blanket, shoulders tight, but didn't pull away. The moss had darkened, pulling toxins out through the skin. The swollen area still looked severe, but the spreading lines had stopped. The wound no longer felt dangerously hot. You're healing, he said simply. Not quickly, but you're moving in the right direction. She studied his face, searching for doubt. Finding none, she let out a slow breath. What about you? She asked. Your mouth, you drew the venom. Does it harm humans the same way? It can, he said, but I didn't swallow any. I rinsed with seed coffee to neutralize the residue. She frowned slightly. Does that actually work? It's helped me before, he said, and it worked enough for today. That answer settled the tension in her shoulders. She dropped her gaze to her leg again. How long before I can stand? Not today, he replied. Possibly tomorrow, with help. But you put your full weight on it too soon, and the muscle will tear. Lysara nodded reluctantly. She wasn't the kind of woman who liked being still. He could see that in the way her fingers kept flexing. A soft voice broke the silence. Is Mama better? Myri blinked up at them, sleepy but alert. She pushed herself upright and rubbed her eyes. Kale handed her a piece of dried fruit from the counter. She accepted it and took a small bite, chewing slowly. Yes, she's improving, Kale said. Myri slid closer to her mother, inspecting the wound with the serious expression of someone far older than she looked. Does it hurt? Only when I move it wrong, Lysara said, brushing the child's cheek. I'll be fine. Myri reached out and pressed her forehead lightly against her mother's shoulder. It wasn't dramatic, just an instinctive gesture of wanting connection after a terrifying night. Kale stepped away to give them space and stirred the pot on the stove. The broth from last night had thickened, so he added more water and a handful of dried stock vegetables. The smell filled the cabin, warm and earthy. He sliced more river meat onto a wooden plate and set it near the heat to warm. Lysara's eyes tracked his movements. Why do you live with so much food stored here? Most hunters keep only what they need. I don't like running out, he said. The trails turn unpredictable when storms roll through, and I'm used to feeding more people than myself. Her brows lifted slightly. Your old unit? He nodded once. We shared everything. Supplies didn't matter unless the whole team had enough. Lysara processed that quietly. She didn't ask about the unit, or what happened to them, or why he wasn't with them anymore. That restraint made him respect her more. She had her own wounds. She recognized someone else's without prodding. Kale filled 2 bowls with broth. He set one on the table and brought the other to the palate. Eat slowly, he told her. Lysara shifted to sit up straighter. When she tried to brace herself on her injured leg, pain flickered across her face. Kale moved instantly, sliding his arm behind her back to support her weight without asking. She stiffened at the contact, heat, tension, awareness, but didn't pull away. Her jaw flexed as she adjusted her posture. He held her steady until she found a comfortable angle, then lowered his hand. Thank you, she said quietly. Kale returned to the stove and poured a cup of hot water for Myri, adding a few slices of warm fruit to soften it into a drink. He placed it beside the child, who cupped it in both hands and leaned her cheek against the warm surface. Lysara ate several spoonfuls before speaking again. The elders, when they come, they will likely send us home. They won't want us to impose on you longer than necessary. Kale leaned one shoulder against the wall. I don't see you as an imposition. You don't know us, Lysara said. I know enough, he answered. I know your daughter kept you alive until I arrived. I know you walked into a storm because your community needed medicine bark. I know you fought to stay conscious long enough for her to pull you out of the water. He paused, voice steady. And I know you're both safer here today than out there. Lysara held his gaze. You talk like someone who's carried a lot of people. I have. Did all of them survive? No. The honesty hung between them. She didn't look away. Myri finished her warm drink and set the cup aside. Then she crawled to sit beside Kale's boots, tugging lightly at the bottom of his trouser leg to get his attention. When you send the signal, she asked, will you tell them we're okay? Yes, Kale said. Will you stay until they arrive? I will. After that, will you still help us? She asked. Lysara shot the child a sharp look, one mixed with worry, embarrassment, and instinct to shield her. But the question came from somewhere raw inside Myri, and Kale didn't dismiss it. I'm not leaving until your mother can move safely, he said. And if you need more help after that, you'll tell me. Not the elders. Me. Myri nodded, shoulders finally relaxing. Lysara watched the exchange, her expression unreadable but softer than last night. Kale moved to the corner of the cabin where a small metal case sat on a shelf. He opened it, revealing a compact signal flare launcher, simple, two-shot, made for forest use. He checked the charge and set it near the door. When the rain thins, I'll fire it, he said. Your people will see the smoke and follow the sound. Lysara looked uneasy. They won't be pleased I left the trail without permission. Kale shrugged. Then they can complain to me. You were doing their work when the snake hit. They're lucky you got as far as you did. Her lips twitched in a small, reluctant smile. You speak as though you know our council. I've supplied their hunters and fixed more than one collapsed walkway for them, he said. They're good people, but councils worry about rules more than they worry about storms. She let out a slow exhale. That is true. Myri suddenly slid off the pallet and stood barefoot on the wooden floor. She walked to Kale's side and took his hand with both of hers, small, warm, and steady. Can we stay near you until Mama walks again? She asked. Our house is very high. The ladders are narrow. She will fall. Lysara inhaled sharply. Myri. Kale knelt so he was level with the child. Yes, he said. You stay here until she can climb safely. Lysara stared at him with surprise and something else, something guarded but warming. You didn't have to say yes so quickly. He stood again, meeting her gaze directly. I don't say things I don't mean. Lysara looked away for a moment, swallowing a knot in her throat. Weakness or relief, he couldn't tell. Myri climbed back onto the pallet and curled beside her mother again. Lysara draped an arm around the girl, pulling her into her side. Kale returned to the table, pulled a knife from its sheath, and began trimming a piece of dried bark for the next moss mixture. His movements were quiet and methodical. He planned out the rest of the day in his head, changing a bandage after a few hours, preparing soft food, firing the signal, checking the weather for potential landslides on the main walkway. He planned to guide her through the steps she needed to regain her independence, even if she didn't fully understand them yet. Lysara watched him from the pallet, eyes half-lidded but attentive. You don't act like most hunters, she said softly. I'm not, Kale replied without looking up. She waited, expecting more, but he didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Not yet. The drizzle outside slowed even more. The forest shifted from storm to heavy mist, the shadows deepening under the canopy. Kale tightened the bandage strip in his hand and moved toward the door. It's time to signal your people, he said. Myri sat up straighter. Lysara tried to push herself upright, but winced at the pull in her thigh. Kale lifted the latch and stepped out onto the deck. The air hit him cold and wet. Mist drifted between the trees. The walkway below glistened with beads of water. He raised the flare launcher, aimed it toward the open gap above the canopy, and fired. A deep crack ripped through the quiet morning. A line of orange smoke burst upward and spread across the hidden sky. The echo carried far through the forest. Kale stayed outside until the smoke thinned, then lowered the launcher and let his breath settle. Inside, behind him, he heard Lysara's quiet voice speak to Myri. Stay close to him. He knows this forest better than anyone. He stepped back into the cabin, aware of her eyes on him, aware that something between all three of them had shifted again. The day had only begun. The flare's echo faded into the dense canopy, swallowed by thick leaves and mist. Kale lowered the launcher and wiped a bead of water from his brow before stepping back inside. The cabin felt smaller now, not cramped but lived in. The warmth from the stove had spread across the floorboards, pushing away the chill that clung to them during the storm. Lysara sat propped against the headboard of the pallet, her breathing steady but shallow. The bandage around her thigh had loosened at one edge. She noticed it too and kept a hand near it, protective and wary. Myri sat cross-legged beside her, fingers playing with a thin piece of string she had found near the table. She had tied a knot in it, untied it, then tied it again, trying to keep her hands busy. Kale crossed to them with a small wooden plate, thin slices of warmed river meat, and 2 pieces of dried fruit. Myri reached for one immediately, but Lysara touched her wrist lightly. "Let him sit first," she said. Kale sat on the floor near the pallet, resting his back against the wooden frame. "Eat," he said. "Both of you. You'll need energy when your people arrive." Lysara took a slice, holding it between her fingers. The meat steamed faintly, the outer edges brown from the stove's heat. She hesitated, then bit into it. Her jaw tightened instinctively from the flavor, strong, salty, gamey, but she kept chewing. Her gaze shifted toward the door. "How long until they come?" "Depends who sees the signal," Kale said. "If your head warden is on rotation, maybe 2 hours. If it's a new apprentice, 4. Lysara sighed softly. "Apprentices take their time." "They always do," Kale agreed. A small silence settled. The quiet wasn't comfortable yet, but it wasn't tense either. Myri leaned forward, passing Kale one of the warm fruit slices. "You didn't eat," she said. Kale raised a brow. "I'm fine. You should eat," she insisted. Lysara watched the exchange, her expression caught between amusement and fatigue. Kale accepted the slice and took a bite. Myri's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if confirming he wasn't going to collapse from overexertion. Lysara took another sip of broth. "What happens if the council asks why we left without permission?" Kale shifted his weight. "I'll tell them. You left to gather bark. The storm hit early. You were right to move fast. That won't stop them from asking questions," Lysara said. "No," Kale replied, "but I can handle questions." She studied him again, this time with more openness. "You speak like someone used to giving explanations." "I used to answer to commanders who wanted every detail written in a report." "Did you like that life?" she asked. Kale shook his head. "I like keeping people alive. I didn't like the walls, or the silence when someone didn't make it back." Lysara absorbed that quietly. She didn't pry deeper. Myri crawled to the edge of the pallet and reached for Kale's hand again. She had done this twice before, both times instinctively. He let her. Her fingers were small, warm, lightly trembling. "Will the council take us back today?" she asked. "They might," Kale said. "Depends on how your mother's leg looks when they arrive." Myri frowned. "I don't want to leave yet." Lysara stroked her daughter's hair. "He's right, Myri. We need to let them check." "But she can't climb," Myri argued. "Even if they say we must go, she can't." Kale stood and moved to the shelf where he kept his spare bindings. "You'll stay until she can stand without tearing the muscle. That's not negotiable." Lysara's eyes followed him. "You speak as though you've already planned our recovery." "I have," he said. She blinked, thrown by the bluntness. "You barely know us." "I know enough." He set the bindings on the table. "And I've seen injuries like yours. If you try to walk too soon, you'll lose more than a day. You'll lose a month." Lysara looked down at her leg. The bandage had darkened slightly from a moss, pulling toxins upward. She brushed a thumb near the edge. "I understand." Myri climbed off the pallet and wandered toward Kale's gear rack. Her bare feet patted softly on the wood. She picked up a small wooden charm that hung from a nail, an old piece carved with simple, circular lines. "What's this?" she asked. Kale joined her. "A sleep charm," he said. "Old habit from my unit. We used to hang them over bunks. Settles the mind before resting." "Does it work?" Myri asked. "Sometimes." Lysara rested her head back against the wall, watching them interact. "Humans use charms." "Some do," Kale said. "Some carry old habits until they don't even think about them anymore." Myri held out the charm. "Can I use it for Mama?" Kale nodded. "You can. It won't hurt." The girl walked back to the pallet and handed the charm to her mother. Lysara held it gently, fingertips tracing the carved grooves. "We have something similar," Lysara said quietly, running her thumb in small circles over the wood. "When a child is frightened, we rub a mark on their wrist and breathe on it. It's supposed to calm the heart." Myri perked up. "Show him." Lysara paused, her eyes flicking toward Kale. She hesitated, unsure if the ritual felt too personal. But then she guided her daughter's wrist upward and demonstrated. She drew a small circle with her fingertip against the thin skin on Myri's wrist, then leaned down and breathed lightly over the mark. The breath was warm and brief, just enough to settle the girl's shoulders. Myri sighed in relief, pressing closer. Cale watched with quiet interest. "Does it work for adults?" he asked. Lysara glanced at him, surprised. "Sometimes, if they allow it." Myri immediately grabbed Cale's hand. "Let Mama do it for you. You look tired." Cale met Lysara's eyes. She looked unsure, almost embarrassed by the idea. But the child's insistence and the intensity of her concern softened the moment. Cale lowered himself to sit near the pallet, placing his forearm across his knee so his wrist faced upward. "If it helps," he said. Lysara wiped her hand on the blanket, then reached for his wrist. Her fingers were cool and careful. She drew the circle slowly, her touch light. Then she leaned forward and breathed once over the mark. Warm, steady, intimate but simple. The warmth from her breath lingered longer than expected. Cale didn't react outwardly, but something in him unclenched. A small, quiet shift. Myri beamed. "See? Now he's better." Cale let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you," he said. Lysara pulled her hand back, eyes dipping away. "It's nothing. Just tradition." "Tradition counts," Cale replied. The cabin door rattled suddenly with a strong knock. All three of them turned toward it. Myri stiffened. "Is that?" Cale held up a hand. "Stay on the pallet." He moved to the door, knife sheathed but close. He opened it. Two figures stood on the deck, both in leaf-woven cloaks, both soaked from mist. One older, wearing a council sash crossed with green threads. The other younger, broad-shouldered, carrying a long staff. The older one spoke first. "Hunter Cale, we saw your signal. We came to retrieve our people." Cale stepped aside, just enough for them to see inside. Not enough for them to walk in. "They're alive, but she's not moving anywhere today." The counselor frowned. "We'll be the judge of that." Cale didn't move. "She won't walk. You try carrying her on that ladder in this weather, you'll drop her." The younger one stepped forward as if to insist, but Lysara's voice interrupted. "I can't hear you," she said, leaning up on her elbow. "And he is right. I can't climb today." The older counselor softened slightly when he saw her. "Lysara, are you well enough to speak?" "Better than last night," she said. "Because he helped us. You arrived too late for that." The counselor looked down, chastened. "We can send supplies," he offered. "Food, blankets." "We have enough," Cale said. The younger man glanced between them. "Should we take the child at least?" Myri darted behind her mother, gripping the blanket tightly. "No," Lysara said instantly. "She stays with me." Cale responded before they could argue. "They both stay here until she can stand without re-injuring the leg. Then I'll bring them to you myself." The older counselor hesitated. "That's unusual. We don't often ask outsiders to host our people." Lysara's eyes flicked toward Cale, then back to the counselor. "He carried me through the storm. That counts for more than a council rule." Cale stepped forward onto the deck, forcing the two men to shift back. "If anyone questions this decision, send them to me." "Not her." The younger man looked ready to protest again, but the counselor lifted a hand. "Very well. We'll send supplies this evening. We trust your judgment." Cale nodded once and closed the door. Inside, Myri released a shaky breath. Lysara eased back against the pillows. "You didn't have to defend us like that," she said softly. "I did," Cale replied, "and I'll keep doing it until you can walk." He returned to the pallet, checking the bandage out of habit. Lysara watched him with an expression that held no fear now, only something warmer, quieter, and far more complicated. Outside, the mist thickened across the canopy. Inside, the three of them settled into a new shape, one that neither council approval nor storm damage could easily undo. The door's latch clicked softly back into place, and the cabin settled into a heavy quiet. The visit from the council had changed something in the room, not with words, but with the way Myri stayed pressed against her mother's side, and the way Lysara kept glancing toward Cale as if reassessing him under a different light. Cale moved around the cabin with quiet purpose. He checked the bandage again, confirmed the bleeding hadn't returned, then set the used cloth aside. The stove crackled with a low, steady flame. Rain no longer fell, but droplets clung to the roof, releasing slow taps that echoed in the wooden frame. Lysara tugged the blanket higher over her lap. They didn't like the idea of us staying here. They don't have to like it, Kale said, adjusting his knife belt before hanging it on the wall. They just have to accept it. Myri crawled toward him with hesitant steps. Will they come back angry? Kale crouched, so he was eye level with her. If they do, I'll handle it. She gave a small nod and leaned forward without thinking, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Her grip was light but desperate. Kale kept one hand on her back, steadying her. Lysara watched, her expression tight with emotion she didn't show often. Myri, she said gently, you shouldn't cling to him like he's yours alone. He's not leaving, Myri said into Kale's shoulder. Not until you can walk. Lysara lowered her eyes. That doesn't make him ours. Kale stood and lifted the child easily onto his hip. You both needed help. That's enough. He set her down beside the pallet again. Now, I need to change the moss pack before it dries. Lysara braced herself while he gathered a fresh handful of Draxon moss and crushed it into paste. She untied the wrap at her hip, revealing more leg than she normally would. She seemed aware of it in the rigid way she kept her shoulders straight and the careful angle she held her chin. Kale didn't stare. He focused on the wound. When he peeled back the bandage, she sucked in a breath and clenched the blanket. The discoloration had receded slightly, though the swelling remained. Her skin pulsed faintly around the edges. This will sting, he said. I'm ready. He pressed the fresh moss onto the inner wound area. Lysara's fingers tightened on Myri's shoulder for support. Sweat formed at her temples, but she let him work. Kale tied a clean bandage around her thigh, lifting her leg only as much as necessary. Her voice broke the silence. Did you ever treat someone you were close to? Kale didn't look up. Yes. Did they survive? No. Lysara held her breath. She didn't ask more. When he finished, she let out a long, quiet exhale. Myri wiped her mother's forehead with the corner of the blanket, copying what she had seen Kale do earlier in the night. Lysara gave her a tired smile. Thank you, little one. Kale moved away to wash his hands. The water in the bowl turned faintly green from the crushed moss. As he dried his palms, Lysara spoke again. You didn't answer the council's question. What question? Why you're so far out here alone? Hunters usually work in pairs. Kale took a moment before responding. I don't work well in pairs anymore. Lysara frowned lightly. Because of what happened in your old unit? He didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. He only said, it's easier to keep people safe when I'm the one making the decisions. That sounds lonely. He looked at her for a moment. Sometimes. Myri crawled across the floor and sat beside him, legs folded under her. But we're here now. That's not lonely. Kale ran a hand lightly through the child's damp, white hair. Not today. The cabin warmed with late morning light pressing through the narrow windows. Outside, mist curled between the trunks, and far-off creaks signaled the trees drying from the storm. Kale moved to the stove and began preparing a more solid meal. He chopped strips of river meat into smaller pieces and dropped them into a heated pan. The smell rose quickly, rich, savory, grounding. You cook every day? Lysara asked. Every day I'm not on long patrol, he said. It smells better than bark stew, Myri remarked. That's a low bar, Lysara said, causing Kale to crack the faintest smile. He handed each of them small wooden bowls filled with meat and softened vegetables. Myri devoured hers quickly, wiping the grease from her lips with the back of her hand. Lysara ate slower, chewing carefully as her body adjusted to real food after shock and venom. After they finished, Kale stepped to the door and opened it just enough to let fresh air in. Mist drifted into the cabin, cooling the space. Myri followed and leaned against the wooden frame, eyes wide at the sight of tiny droplets hanging in the air. Can I go outside? She asked. Only onto the deck, Kale said. Don't go near the railing. She walked out barefoot and pressed her palms to the cool timber. The deck still glistened with scattered droplets. Lysara shifted on the pallet, trying to adjust her position. Pain crossed her face again. Kale noticed instantly. Let me help you sit higher. I can manage. You nearly tore the bandage, he said firmly. She sighed. but let him approach. He slipped an arm behind her back and lifted her just enough to slide another folded blanket behind her. Her breathing hitched at the movement, her thigh trembling. Kale steadied her until she found a comfortable position. Her voice came low. "You treat us like we're already yours to protect. I treat you like people who need someone to stand with them until they're strong again." Her eyes lifted toward him with something fragile beneath the exhaustion. Uncertainty, gratitude, fear of depending on someone she didn't fully understand. "I don't want to owe anyone a life," she whispered. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You're here because it's the safest place for your daughter. That's all." She opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of Myri's giggle cut through the moment. The child had discovered a cluster of hanging water droplets near the railing and was flicking them off one by one. Each drop scattered into a faint mist that caught the morning light. "She hasn't laughed like that in weeks," Lysara said, watching her daughter quietly. "That's good," Kale replied. Lysara rested her head back against the wall. "When they come to check again, what if they tell us to leave before I'm ready? Then they'll have to deal with me," Kale said. "But your recovery comes first." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "What? Because your child needs you walking," he said, "and because I said I would help." Lysara studied him long enough for the air between them to thicken. "What if helping us makes your life harder?" He folded his arms. "Some things are worth the trouble." Before she could respond, Myri called from the deck. "Kale, look." She held up a small cluster of forest seeds she had collected from the railing's corner. They were pale green, smooth, and shaped like tiny beads. "Can I make a charm with these?" she asked. "You can," Kale said. "Bring them inside so they dry." She ran back in, nearly tripping on the threshold, and Lysara caught her by the arm. The sudden movement jolted her injured leg, and Kale saw the pain flash through her body. He was at her side instantly. "Don't move that fast." Myri froze, panicked. "Did I hurt you?" Lysara cupped her cheek. "No, I moved wrong. That's all." Kale adjusted the blanket over Lysara's legs again. "We'll start exercises later. Small ones, to wake the muscle without tearing it." Lysara looked at him with a mixture of apprehension and trust. "You're certain you know how to guide that?" "Yes," he said. "I led recovery drills for years." The way she held his gaze shifted, something warmer now, something that wasn't fear or uncertainty. Myri placed a cluster of seeds into Kale's palm. "We should all make a charm," she said. "One for her, one for me, and one for you." Kale closed his hand around the seeds. "All right." Lysara leaned back, eyes softening. "She doesn't bond easily, not since her father died." Kale's attention flicked back to the child. Myri was humming to herself now, sorting seeds by size on the table. He spoke quietly. "She won't go through another loss while you're here." Lysara held his gaze. There is no shame this time, no defensiveness. Only the fragile acceptance of someone realizing she was no longer facing danger alone. Kale didn't move away. He planned to guide her through every step she needed to stand again, even if she didn't fully understand that yet. Kale checked the doorway one more time, ensuring the latch was secure. Afternoon light filtered through the narrow windows, turning the cabin into a warm pocket suspended above the forest. The storm had passed, but the air still held a damp heaviness that made every sound sharper. Myri spread her seeds across the table, lining them in uneven rows, humming quietly to herself. Lysara tried to shift into a more upright position, but when she moved her leg the wrong way, her breath caught hard. She covered it quickly, but Kale saw the tremor run through her thigh. "You shouldn't force it," he said. "I'm not forcing anything," she replied, though her jaw tightened. Kale stepped to the pallet, his movements deliberate. "We start the first stretch now." Slowly, Lysara watched him cautiously. "Already, you rested all morning. The muscle needs to wake before it stiffens." She hesitated. The storm, the council, the strange new safety of this cabin, all of it had pushed her into a place she didn't fully understand yet. Trust felt unfamiliar in her chest, heavy and warm. She gave a small nod. "All right." Kale knelt beside her and placed one hand beneath her knee, lifting the leg only a few centimeters. The other hand supported her ankle. His grip was firm but not rough. The shift in position made Lysara's breath break again. She tried to steady it. "Tell me when it burns too sharply," Kale said. "It already burns," she answered quietly. "Good. That means the venom didn't settle deeper." He raised her leg a little more. The tension built along her thigh, drawing a low sound from her throat. Myri looked over, worried, but Lysara motioned her back to her seats. Kale measured her reaction. "Hold it there." 2 breaths. Lysara exhaled slowly. The strain in her voice made each breath sound deliberate. When he lowered her leg again, the relief came like a slow release of pressure. Her forehead beaded with sweat. Kale reached for a clean cloth and wiped it gently without asking. She let him. He sat back on his heels. "You did better than I expected." Lysara looked at him sharply. "Don't treat me like a child." "I'm not. I'm stating what happened." She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away, frustrated, proud, but also calmer than before. Myri climbed onto the pallet beside her mother, clutching the seeds in her fist. "When her leg gets better, can we go to the canopy market again?" Lysara stroked the girl's hair. "We will, when I can walk." Myri nodded, then suddenly leaned against Kale's side instead. It was a simple move, but it startled him. One small hand rested against his ribs. She stayed there like she belonged, as if his steadiness felt safer than the pillows. Kale didn't push her away. He rested a hand lightly on her back. "You're tired," he said. "No, I'm just staying here." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Don't go anywhere today." Kale heard the tone clearly. A child's fear held under a thin layer of calm. "I'll stay. You don't need to worry." Myri squeezed his shirt once, then settled against him again. Lysara watched the scene, her expression tight with emotion she didn't speak aloud. She had seen her daughter shrink away from strangers her entire life. Seeing her open up to someone this easily pulled at something deep inside her. Lysara cleared her throat. "You don't have to keep carrying all this responsibility." Kale looked at her. "I'm not carrying it alone. You're helping." She almost laughed. "I'm lying on your bed, unable to stand. What exactly am I helping with?" "You're here," he said simply. "That changes the way the cabin feels." She blinked at the unexpected honesty. Her hand brushed the edge of the blanket, restless. "You don't seem like someone who likes company." "I don't like the wrong company." He glanced at Myri, who was still resting against his side. "This isn't wrong." Lysara lowered her eyes, unsure how to process that. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. She wasn't used to hearing a human speak without trying to impress or pity her. The cabin door knocked lightly, 3 soft taps. Myri jumped. Kale eased her back onto the pallet before going to the door. "Stay behind me," he said. Lysara braced herself. Myri climbed behind her mother, gripping her arm tightly. Kale opened the door crack. A young canopy runner stood outside with a small basket on his back. No sash, no staff, just a messenger. Rain mist clung to his hair, and he looked nervous. "I was told to bring supplies," he said quickly. "Food, clean cloth, medicines." Kale opened the door wider. "Set the basket down." The runner obeyed, placing the basket on the deck. He didn't step inside. His eyes flicked toward Lysara, then away quickly, as if embarrassed. I have a message," the runner said. "The council will check on her again tomorrow." Kale nodded. "Good." The runner hesitated. "They're worried people will talk." "People always talk," Kale said. "Close the subject if they ask you questions." The runner nodded once, grateful for the instruction, then hurried down the walkway. Kale closed the door and locked it. Myri whispered, "Was he here to take us away?" "No," Kale said. "He was just nervous." Lysara let out a slow breath. "They're moving fast. Too fast. They want control of the story," Kale answered. "We didn't tell them anything," she said quietly. "But they heard enough to make assumptions." Kale approached her again. "What they think isn't as important as what you decide." Lysara's eyes softened at that. "You say it like I have choices." "You do." He sat down beside the pallet. "And you'll have more when your leg heals." Myri scooted closer to her mother, laying her head on Lysara's stomach. "Can we stay here until she's strong?" Lysara hesitated. Kale waited without pressuring her. "Yes," she said at last. "We'll stay until I can walk." Myri's relief showed immediately in the way she relaxed against her. Kale stood. Good. That gives us time to rebuild strength. He returned to the table and sorted through the supplies from the basket. Wrapped root vegetables, a block of hardened meat, coils of clean bandage, and a small vial of clear medicine. Lysara watched him closely. You prepare as if you expect trouble. I prepare because trouble comes when people assume it won't. She didn't argue. He brought her a bowl of warm root mash mixed with small pieces of meat. Eat, he said. Your body needs it. She took the bowl, fingers brushing his for half a second. Long enough for Kale to feel the warmth of her skin and long enough for her to notice he didn't pull away. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware of how much effort he had put into the cabin's order since they came. After finishing, she set the bowl aside. You said we'll start more exercises later. How many? 3 today, 5 tomorrow. Will increase as your leg responds. And the pain? She asked. You'll manage it, he said. I'll guide you. She nodded, accepting his authority without feeling dominated by it. That was new for her, and grounding. Outside, distant canopy horns sounded, a routine call marking the late afternoon cycle. Myri perked up. Can we make the charms now? She asked. Kale gestured toward the table. Bring the seeds. Myri gathered them with both hands and sat beside him. Lysara tried to shift closer, but couldn't move without reopening the pain. Kale noticed and pulled the table stool nearer. He threaded a thin rope through the first seed, showing Myri how to press gently until it pierced. Like this, he said. Myri concentrated hard, tongue slightly between her teeth, copying the motion with intense seriousness. Lysara watched, her lips curving faintly. She hasn't had patience like this in a long time. Kale didn't look up from the rope. She doesn't need patience. She needs stability. Lysara's voice lowered, which is why we stay. Kale tied the first charm and set it on the table. A small loop of green seeds, simple but meaningful. He placed it into Lysara's hand. Yours. She cradled it carefully. I haven't worn a charm since before she was born. Wear it now, he said. It marks the beginning of recovery. Slowly, Lysara tied it around her wrist. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from pain, but from the vulnerability of accepting something made for her by someone she didn't fear anymore. Myri finished her charm and held it up proudly. Look, mine's bigger. Kale smiled at her attempt. It's good. And yours? Lysara asked quietly. Kale finished tying the last loop, smaller than the others, but sturdier. He slid it around his wrist without ceremony. Something shifted between them at that moment. Not dramatic, not spoken, just a silent acknowledgement that the three of them were no longer temporary guests and hosts. They were becoming something more solid. Myri leaned against her mother again. Can we sleep here tonight, too? Lysara stroked her hair. Yes. Kale gathered the bowls. I'll take the floor near the door. Myri shook her head. No, stay close. It feels safer. Kale paused. Lysara didn't interrupt. All right, he said. I'll stay nearby. Night crept through the canopy, soft and cool. The forest hummed gently. The cabin lights glowed in warm circles. Kale watched Lysara settle back against the pallet. Myri curled beside her. Their breathing synced naturally, a quiet rhythm he found unexpectedly steadying. He stayed close, not touching, not intruding, just present. And for the first time in a long time, none of them felt like they were waiting for someone to take something away. Night settled fully over the canopy, dimming the world beyond the cabin windows until only scattered glimmers of bioluminescent spores floated in the dark. The forest hummed, low, steady, familiar. Inside, the lantern cast a muted amber glow across the wooden walls, catching the quiet shift of bodies settling into rest. Kale stayed seated near the pallet with his back to the wall, one knee raised, hand loosely draped over it. He wasn't sleeping, only listening. Lysara breathed steadily beside Myri, though every now and then her leg twitched from healing muscles. Myri rested curled close to her mother, one hand gripping the charm on her wrist like she feared losing it. Kale's eyes drifted between them, then toward the door. His instincts kept him alert long after the forest quieted. Years of patrol had conditioned him to sleep lightly, but tonight his thoughts refused silence more than the sounds outside. He didn't like how the council had reacted earlier. Not hostile, not yet, but cautious in a way that told him rumors were spreading faster than help. And he had seen that kind of tension before. It never favored the injured. A soft sound broke the stillness, a faint gasp. Lysara's body stiffened. Her breathing quickened, uneven. Her fingers clenched around the blanket. Kale straightened immediately. Myri felt the shift and stirred. "Mama." Lysara's eyes opened, unfocused, unfixed. Her chest rose too fast. She wasn't fully awake. Her hand pressed against the bandage as if trying to protect the old trauma beneath the venom wound. Kale moved closer, slow and calm. "Lysara, you're safe. Look at me." Her breath hitched and her shoulders trembled. "It's too dark. I can't breathe." Kale recognized the signs. Night panic, born of pain or memory. He stopped just short of touching her until she reached toward him first, fingers curling weakly. He took her hand firmly. "Focus here. My voice. You're in the cabin. Not outside. Not in the storm." Myri climbed onto her mother's other side. "Mama, it's okay. You're with us." Lysara closed her eyes and tried to drag in a deeper breath, but her body fought her. Kale brushed a hand along her forearm. Light, steady pressure. "Stay with us." Slow breaths. "Match mine." He inhaled once through his nose, slow and controlled. Then exhaled. Lysara tried to follow. Her body tensed again, but her breathing eased slightly as she matched his rhythm. Myri placed her forehead against her mother's shoulder, anchoring her. Kale kept his voice low. "Good. You're doing fine." After a few cycles, Lysara's breathing steadied. Her grip loosened, though she didn't let go entirely. She opened her eyes, clearer now. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," Kale said. She glanced at her daughter, worried she might have scared her. But Myri only adjusted the blanket around them with a practiced ease, as if this wasn't the first time she had comforted her mother through a memory she never explained. Kale shifted the lantern closer, brightening the room. "Better?" "Yes." Lysara wiped a hand over her face. "I woke and thought I was somewhere else." "You're here," Kale said, "and you won't be anywhere else until you choose it." Myri tugged his sleeve softly. "She needs water." Kale handed the gourd from the table, steadying it as Lysara drank. Her throat worked slowly with each swallow. When she finished, he set it aside and knelt close again. "You should rest," he said. "I thought I was," she murmured. "Your body's trying," Kale replied. "Your mind's catching up." Lysara looked away, embarrassed. "Myri shouldn't see me like this." "Mama, I always see you," Myri said, crawling up to sit near her head. "You're still you." Lysara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by her daughter's blunt honesty. She brushed her fingers through Myri's long white hair. "Come here." Myri leaned into her mother, small shoulders relaxing. Kale watched them, his expression unreadable but grounded. Something in the way Lysara fought to compose herself made him understand her in a way he hadn't yet voiced. She wasn't afraid of pain. She was afraid of being seen in weakness, afraid it would be used against her. He sat beside the pallet, close enough that she felt supported without being crowded. "Tomorrow we start longer steps," he said, "but not without your consent. You tell me when we push forward." Lysara opened her eyes and met his. "And if I say no?" "You say no," he replied. "Then we wait." Her chest rose slowly. His answer steadied her more than the water had. A faint rustle came from outside, a shifting of leaves on a walkway. Kale reacted instantly. He stood, checked the window slit, and returned to the door. Myri stiffened again. "Is someone there?" she asked. Kale cracked the door open and checked the walkway. Nothing. Only drifting spores and distant sway of branches. "No one," he said. Myri didn't relax until he relatched the door. Lysara watched him, studying the tension still in his shoulders. "You expect someone," she said. "I expect caution," he answered. "Your council may be calm. Your villagers, not always." Lysara looked down at her hands. "They'll think we owe you everything now." "You owe me nothing," Kale repeated. "But rumor doesn't care about truth," she said. He walked back toward her and sat on the edge of the pallet, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the heat of his presence. "Then let them talk. When you can walk," you'll speak for yourself. Until then, I'll stand between you and whatever noise reaches this door." She studied him with an expression that showed something shifting again, trust taking its place where suspicion once lived. Myri tugged at the collar of Kale's shirt. "Can we stay after she walks too?" Lysara hesitated. Kale didn't answer for her. He waited. Myri whispered, "I don't want another house. I want this one." Lysara smoothed her daughter's hair. "We make decisions together." Myri nodded, though her lower lip trembled. Kale rested a hand gently on Myri's back. "We'll talk about it when your mother's stronger." Myri leaned forward suddenly, pressing her forehead to Kale's chest. "Please don't leave." It hit harder than anything said that day. Lysara's eyes widened, not from shock, but from the rawness of hearing her daughter beg so simply. She whispered, voice fragile, "Myri." The child spoke again, softer this time, but clearer than anything she had ever said. "I don't want to lose him too." The room froze around that sentence. Lysara's breath broke once, her eyes shining. Kale felt Myri's small fists clutching his shirt, and he placed one hand on the back of her head, guiding her gently against him. "I'm here," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." He looked at Lysara when he said it, not as a promise forced by a child, but as a decision he had already made. Lysara held his gaze, something unfolding inside her in a way she couldn't hide anymore. "Then stay," she said, barely audible. "For as long as we need." Kale nodded once, firm and certain. "I will." The cabin settled again, but the silence between them had changed. It no longer felt like a temporary refuge. It felt like the beginning of something they would all have to face together, even if none of them could yet name what it was. Dawn arrived quietly, without the harsh storm sounds that had marked so many of their recent nights. Soft amber light seeped through the narrow windows, brushing over the floorboards and across the blankets where Lysara and Myri slept. The cabin smelled faintly of last night's cooked meat and the clean, cool air drifting in from the forest. Kale was already awake, seated on the edge of the deck with his boots half-laced, watching the forest shift from blue-gray shadow to muted green. The walkway was slick with morning dew, but stable. No sounds of visitors, no rustling from councils or runners. Just stillness. He heard a quiet rustle behind him. Myri stood in the doorway, hair messy from sleep, one hand rubbing her eyes. "Did you sleep?" she asked. Kale tied the last knot on his boot. "Enough." She stepped outside and sat beside him, legs dangling off the edge. "Are we still here today?" "Yes," Kale said. "Your mother needs one more day before I test her walk." Myri nodded. She leaned lightly against his arm, not asking for permission, just settling where she felt safest. Kale didn't move away. Inside, Lysara stirred. Pain flickered through her jaw as she pushed herself upright, but she tolerated it better than yesterday. The charm around her wrist shifted with emotion. She touched it for a moment, grounding herself. She looked at the doorway. "Myri." "Here, Mama," the girl answered. Kale stood and stepped back into the cabin. Lysara looked different in the morning light, still tired, still pale, but steadier than he'd seen her since the bite. Her long hair fell in tangled waves over one shoulder, catching the sunlight in faint silver lines. "How's your leg?" Kale asked. She lifted the blanket just enough to see the bandage. "Tight, but stronger." "We'll check it," he said. She nodded, bracing herself on her elbows as he knelt beside the pallet. He unwrapped the bandage carefully. The swelling had reduced. The discoloration had faded to faint shadows near the edges. The injury still looked angry, but it was healing. "That looks better," Kale said. Lysara exhaled, something easing inside her. "I didn't think it would heal this fast." "You're stubborn," he said. "That helps." She shot him a dry, amused glance. "I thought humans preferred the word determined." "That too." He applied a fresh layer of moss and tightened the clean bandage. She winced, but she didn't flinch. When he finished, he rose and extended a hand. "You're standing today." She stared at the hand, uncertain. "Right now?" "Now," he said, "before the muscle cools." She swallowed and placed her fingers in his. Her palm felt warm against his calloused grip. Myri hurried over, grabbing the blanket with both hands as if ready to help. Kale supported Lysara's weight as she swung her legs off the pallet. She took a deep breath, then let him pull her gently upright. Her feet touched the floor. She wobbled immediately, breath catching from the pain. Kale steadied her waist with both hands. "Slow," he said. "Shift your weight." Her fingers curled around his forearm, nails digging lightly as she balanced. She forced her injured leg to bear a fraction of her weight. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't withdraw. Myri clapped once, excited. "She's doing it." Lysara shot her daughter a look of strained amusement. "It's not as impressive as it looks." Kale shook his head. "It is. You're standing on your own." For the first time, Lysara let herself acknowledge it. "I am," she whispered. Kale guided her back down before her leg shook too sharply. Once seated, she covered her face with both hands in a brief, overwhelmed gesture. When she lowered them, her eyes glistened, not with pain this time, but with something quieter, deeper. "I didn't think I'd reach this point," she said. "You did," Kale replied. "And you'll walk." Myri climbed beside her and hugged her tightly. "When you walk again, can we stay here?" Lysara stiffened. She glanced at Kale, uncertain how much to say or what choice she should claim as hers. Kale didn't pressure her. "This cabin has room for the three of you," he said, "if that's what you want." Lysara looked around the space. The stove, the wooden shelf, the hammock rolled up under the rafters, the small table where Myri arranged her seeds, the pallet where she had almost died but also healed. Then she looked back at Kale. "Is it really a choice?" she asked. "Or do you feel responsible for us?" "I don't feel trapped," Kale said. "If that's what you're asking." She searched his face. "And what do you feel?" Kale didn't look away. "I want you here." The words landed between them with a weight neither tried to escape. Myri held her breath, watching them with wide eyes. Lysara reached for her daughter's hand. "Then we stay," she said, voice steady. "For her. And for us." Myri brightened instantly, hugging Lysara again. "We're not leaving," she whispered. "We're not going anywhere." Kale felt something settle inside him too. Something he had been avoiding naming. Relief, responsibility, and a quiet, grounding certainty. He cleared his throat lightly. "You still need exercises. And real food." "Real food," Lysara echoed. Kale nodded. "I was saving something." He walked to the storage cabinet and removed a small wrapped bundle. Inside were 3 thick slices of cured canopy beast meat. Rare, expensive, and meant for strength building. He set them on the pan over the stove. The scent rose quickly, rich, salty, heavy with flavor. Lysara inhaled the smell, eyes half-lidded. "That's actual meat from above the ridge?" "It is," Kale said. "How did you?" "I trade sometimes. Don't worry about the details." When the meal was ready, he served them each a portion. Lysara took a bite, and her eyes softened instantly at the taste. Myri devoured hers quickly, juice running down her chin. Kale wiped her mouth with a cloth before she could smear it across her sleeve. Lysara watched the small gesture. "You do that like you've done it before." Kale set the cloth down. "I haven't. Not with a child." "Then how do you know?" she asked. He shrugged slightly. "You watch someone long enough, you learn what they need." She didn't have a response to that. Not right away. After they finished eating, Kale opened the cabin door to let in fresh air. Lysara tried shifting again on the pallet, testing the new strength in her leg. "Want to try one more step today?" he asked. She nodded. "One." Kale helped her stand again, supporting her weight without holding too tight. Lysara placed her injured foot forward just half a pace. The movement was small, but controlled. When she set it down, her expression tightened with effort, but she didn't collapse. "That's enough," Kale said, moving her back into a sitting position. Lysara exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from her brow. "That felt real, like I might actually walk soon." "You will," Kale said. Myri grabbed her charm and waved it near her mother's wrist. "It helped." "See?" Lysara smiled faintly. "Maybe it did." Kale leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely, looking at both of them with a steadiness that felt more like commitment than obligation. "We'll rebuild the deck tomorrow," he said. "You'll want something strong to hold on to when you take full steps." Lysara looked up at him, eyes tracing the lines of his face, calm resolute, familiar in a way that surprised her. "You're already planning ahead." "I always plan ahead," he said, "especially when someone depends on it." Lysara breathed in slowly, absorbing the meaning beneath the words. Myri crawled in her lap, head resting against her chest. "We're really staying," the girl whispered. Lysara kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Yes." Kel softened his stance near the wall. "Then this cabin is your home now. The council can say what they want. You'll speak for yourselves when the time comes." Lysara nodded once, firm. "We won't hide. You won't have to," Kale said. The forest brightened as full daylight broke across the canopy. Inside the cabin, the three of them sat close, Lysara with her daughter in her arms, Kale standing watch like he had been doing long before he realized they had already taken root in his life. No one spoke for a while. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already understood.